Hello, we're here at AQS QuiltWeek in Paducah, and I get to interview Janet Stone, the winner of the Janome America Best of Show Award. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Oh my
Quite
gosh.
a thrill.
And what another beautiful quilt you have.
Thank you.
So let's just back up a little bit because you've won this award before, have you not?
This is the third time. Third time's a charm. Yep.
Yes. Well, and it was fun at the awards because you said you completed your bucket list.
I mean, I was so excited about this one. I cannot tell you. I mean, you know, it's been several years since we've had this show. So, yeah, it's always a complete shock and thrill.
Well, your quilts are always so detailed. The number one question I've gotten so far, and I'm sure you have too, is how did you make this quilt a two-sided quilt?
Well, it was an accident. It was not planned that way. The individual blocks, I did the applique on them, and then my intention was to put them on the red backgrounds and to quilt through the whole thing. And when I got to that point, there was, on some of these blocks, there's a lot of layers of fabric. And I just thought, oh my gosh, that's going to be way too many layers of fabric to quilt through because I quilt on a home sewing machine.
Right, and especially with you had batting and a backing in
right,
there.
Right,
Yes,
there's a lot of stuff to go through. So I just came up at the time, I thought, you know, I think I'm just going to quilt these little blocks separately, which will allow me to, you have to visualize the quilt with all these red blocks on it by itself without the applique blocks on it. So I was able to, I sandwiched the whole thing, I quilted the borders and the sashing front to back. It's the same on the front to back, but then I had all these blank squares where the applique squares go. So I was able to design, mark, and quilt inside those squares from the back of the quilt. And then after that was done, I was able to attach these individual blocks to the front with I used a clear monofilament thread on the top and the bobbin so that you didn't see where they were attached from the back.
Okay, so if I were looking at the back of the quilt, and we will look at that so we can see it in more detail. If I were looking at the back of the quilt, you quilted that through everything except these blocks that are on the front.
Right, these blocks were not on here, but I did stitch in the ditch around each block, so I knew where that space was on the back.
Okay.
And then I was able to design the quilting that's on the back and mark it, which was a lot easier because the back is neutral colors. So I was able to mark it, and then I quilted it from the back just for these individual squares.
And then, since you had already quilted the blocks themselves,
yes,
it was just appliquing those on top,
right,
then, wasn't it?
So yes, and if you took these blocks off, you would see the quilting that's on the back from this side, but it would be backwards.
That's
nothing confusing about that.
No, well, no, but it's a genius idea.
Well, like I say, it was totally accident. That I had not planned it that way. It was just when I finished these blocks, I was like, oh my gosh, all these layers I'm going to have to quilt through, and it's kind of a. This is all flannel. The color part of this quilt is all flannel fabric. The rest of it's cotton. The neutrals are cotton and the tan is cotton. But flannel fabric is a little bit thicker than just regular cotton. So it was like, oh gosh, I don't know how I'm going to quilt and manipulate the whole quilt underneath the machine because it's a heavy quilt.
So now flannel is thicker
it's
too than cotton.
Yeah.
And so you used fusible applique because you did a buttonhole stitch with by machine.
Right.
And so what kind of a fusible did you use so that you don't get fraying on those edges?
You know, I have not found a perfect fusible yet, but I think on this one, I don't even remember. It was either like a steam-a-seam or the one that I can't remember the name of the other one. Okay. But the problem that I have with fusibles, generally speaking, is that I tend to starch my fabrics really well, and fusibles don't like to stick to starched fabrics.
Right.
So if they would just make a fusible that would stick to a starch fabric, I'd be really happy. I kind of make do, you know.
So that's a little tip to our audience out there, is that if they're going to do fusible and
don't starch your fabric. Yeah,
you're going to have a problem.
You're going to have a problem. Yeah, yeah.
Well, and I know you have a zillion buttons on this, and so the alphabet are buttons.
That was a fabric that I've had for a long time.
These little gingham flower-like are buttons. all the way around the trim on your tabs has a button.
Yeah, little stars.
And so, is there something, a little trick that you use to do those?
I just buy really flat. They have holes in them. I mean, they're just flat buttons. They're plastic, and I just cut a little circle that's a little bigger than the button. I use a particular glue that sticks really well. It's the same glue I use to stick them down with. And I glue the button and cut the circle, and I do cut little clips, almost little V shapes around that circle so that they will fold in nicely.
Right.
I mean, I'd sit and do it in front of the TV, and it really doesn't take all that much time. I mean, it takes me a minute or two to do each one, and I kind of like doing it. It adds a little bit different element to the quilt, a little more dimensional element.
Now, I heard you tell a story about the half moon shape on the border.
On the border, yes. That was, I always say I say I designed my quilts, from the start, but they never turn out really what the original design looked like. This one was really way off from the original design. But yeah, the little they were kind of like little sunshine shapes on the edges. When I was in the process of making the quilt, I had those made. I hadn't done anything further out with the border from those, but I had them on my design wall, and I was trying to figure out what to put next to the quilt because they were facing out. They were facing towards the edge, and I just could not figure. I kept drawing and make drawings and trying to figure out what to do, and I was telling my husband, I said, you got to help me out. What do I need to do here? He said, well, just turn them the other way. So they're facing in. I'm like, okay. So I did that.
Right?
I was like, duh. So it totally worked out, yeah.
Well, now, of course, all of these blocks represent a letter in the alphabet.
Right.
And so there are some that are kind of special and a little bit different.
Yep. Well, the gingerbread man, my mother-in-law collected gingerbread men in her kitchen for the longest time, so that was in homage to her. The Siamese cat was a late Siamese cat that we used to have, which we adored. The most interesting one is probably the X, which is actually my hand x-ray. While I was making this quilt, I broke my little finger, which is now permanently bent, and I was going to do an x-ray in that block, but when I broke my finger, they sent me the copies of my x-ray. I thought, well, I'll just use that for the X block. And
so that one's very personal.
It's very personal, and actually when I was making the quilt, I didn't want to stop quilting, so I used gloves to quilt with, and I actually had to cut out the little finger to be able to quilt because I had a splint on my finger. It wouldn't fit through the glove, but it all worked out. So,
well, it's another beautiful quilt, and so is this going to the Quilt Museum?
It is going to go to the museum. I am honored to have it in the Quilt Museum, yes.
Well,
yeah.
It will be beautiful on display over there.
Thank you.
This is quilt number?
This is number 20.
Okay.
21, 22, and 23 are finished. I am working on 24.
Okay.
And buying fabric this weekend for number 25.
Well, and so you only have 2 more to go.
I have 2 more to
finish
go.
your alphabet.
Yep, I know. People keep asking me what I'm going to do next. I have no idea. We'll just get to 26 and we'll figure it out then. So.
Oh, well, this is a beautiful quilt, and thank you so much for entering it, and
thanks.
congratulations on winning the Janome America Best of Show.
I'm thrilled. Thank you so much.
And we hope that you'll enter your quilts, because you could be sitting right here talking to me, couldn't they, Janet?
They could. Got to enter to win.